Teacher Survivalist Module 5, Sarcasms, Function, and Detriment to your classroom ecosystem. Stop hurting your students' feelings and pretending that you're joking. For real, this happens all the time. So in Module 5, you'll be assessing your own sarcasm in your classroom, how you use it, why you use it, and its overall effect on your teaching ecosystem. As you learn about your own sarcasm in your classroom, use the companion resource to start to understand why you are being sarcastic, when your sarcasm comes up, oftentimes it's in response to feeling defensive or attacked, how your sarcasm is impacted by your own possible insecurities. We're going to also look a lot at apologizing, what it means to be human in your classroom and actually apologize to your students. You'll gain a better understanding about how apologies can enhance classroom trust. And finally, you'll come up with your own mantra or statement to self-police sarcasm as you feel it coming up in your system. Reducing sarcasm in your classroom is a practice. It takes time, it takes awareness, and it takes the hard work. So today is just step one towards creating a better classroom ecosystem.
You don't need to try so hard. Realize you're right where you need to be. You had it from the very start. Hidden in your heart is a remedy. Don't be sad, don't get stuck in the past. Don't try to force it, nothing will last. Nothing's real if it's not in this moment.
Oh my gosh, don't I look good today? I look so good. You know what I like about you? Let me just tell you. You know what I really like about you? Nothing. I can't hit students, but you can run into my fist by accident. If you don't stop, I'm going to throat punch you. These are all things that have come out of my mouth in teaching. Please don't get me fired. So today's topic is all about sarcasm. And the short of what we're going to talk about today is, can you make it land or can you just offend people? Right? So if the following words have ever come out of your mouth, you might be in trouble. Oh my gosh, I'm just kidding. Why are you being so sensitive? Or, gosh, can't you take a joke? Then that probably means that your sarcastic mind ain't a working. And that's not the person's problem that you're talking to. That's your problem. And in daily life, that would be no big deal. But we're teachers, y'all. We are teachers. We have these young, delicate minds that we're trying to shape and take care of. And so being sarcastic with students, then turning around and kind of like pointing the finger in their face and saying, what's wrong with you? Why can't you take a joke? What's the deal? That's not really fair. So today we're going to talk all about sarcasm. And there'll be a little bit of an aspect to this. I want you to keep this in the back of your mind throughout because I'm not going to talk about it in length. But remember, when we talk about sarcasm, there is a whole community of students that we teach who are neurodiverse. And sarcasm and neurodiversity don't really go hand in hand. Quite honestly, everything that we're going to talk about today, I've been able to kind of reflect and look in on myself because of the neurodiverse students that I've taught in the past. They've taught me to say what I mean and mean what I say, and be careful with my word choices. So let's kind of just keep that in the back of the mind as we work our way through sarcasm. So let's start with a definition of sarcasm. I'm going to give you kind of two definitions. The first one is a sharp and often satirical or ironic utterance designed to cut or give pain. The second one is a mode of satirical wit depending for its effect on bitter, caustic, and often iconic language that's usually directed against an individual. So let that sit with you for a second. And let's notice that the end goal of sarcasm is to elicit pain or to kind of direct it against or show irritation. These are kind of like little snippets. And the way I'd put it, Dem's fighting words. Your sarcasm is someone else's fighting words. Or it could be. So I'm starting off a little bit heavy, a little bit kind of like direct, a little bit like putting you on the defensive. So just be aware. And it's meant to be funny, but it's typically meant to be funny at the expense of. At the expense of what? At the expense of others? At the expense of you? It's not irony. You might mean it to be, but it's not irony. It's sarcasm. And before we go further, remember, if it's meant to be funny and you're like, well, I'm not saying it to offend anyone else, I'm saying it at the expense of myself. We live in a time and culture right now where that's dangerous. Okay? Because what are you really telling people? We'll talk about why are you being sarcastic. This is one of those reasons. Are you being sarcastic with students to deal with your own crap? To deal with your own insecurities? To deal with your own pain? Because if you're being sarcastic at the expense of yourself, at the expense of putting down yourself, putting down your looks, putting down what you wear, putting down your teaching, putting down your lifestyle, putting down your financial situation, you're teaching students that not only do you not matter, but why should they feel confident in themselves? I've talked about faking it until you make it, confidence in students, and I can't tell you how important this is, but you have to believe it before you can get them to believe it. So please stop being sarcastic against yourself. We'll start there today. And then I did mention in the beginning of the episode about the effects of being sarcastic on neurodiverse students. And the short of what I'm going to say is listen to your neurodiverse students. Listen specifically to your students with autism. You'll see the reaction. You'll see it on their face, or you'll see it in their writing, or you'll see it in their behavior, because it will be taken directly without the humor, without the wit, because that's not seen. So if you're experiencing a classroom environment with maybe a new student that you're not familiar with, who is on the spectrum, deep into the spectrum of being autistic or other neurodiverse capabilities, I'm going to say, that are just different from your own, take it from 80% down to 20. So if you're operating at 80% sarcasm, buddy, you need to drop it to 20. All right. As we talk today, sarcasm is huge in my family. So I've given you some samples in the beginning of the episode where I talk about, I love that one. It's so bad. I'm sorry. It's so bad. I still say it. I probably will get fired. But when a student's being like annoying, frustratingly annoying, and you have that relationship, remember that's key. You have that relationship. I'll say, John, you're driving me nuts. And I want you to remember, I can't hit a student, but you can accidentally run into my fist. All right. That's some pretty heavy sarcasm, and it's loaded with a threat. And it is kind of funny, but what I also will caution, I see this all the time. Remember group dynamics. I mentioned those in the beginning. Think of a bell curve, and that bell curve kind of goes from neutral to kind of like chaos, class chaos, which would be low, and it goes to like equilibrium all the way up to euphoria when everybody's really loving each other and it's great. So there's this bell curve that just kind of like goes up and down, up and down, up and down. Well, remember, there's always a down. So even on, your best class and your best school year, there's always going to be a down moment. And what sucks is you don't know when that is necessarily. You might feel it. You might see it with a lot of the students that show outwardly their feelings towards a class or you or each other, but there's students that are a little bit more inward who don't share those things. And I always had a coworker that I adored, and I would always kind of like caution them because they would be really buddy with their students. And it would be at that euphoric time when everybody's getting along and everybody's great. But it was almost like you could see the writing on the wall. Like, wait until you get about 2.5, 3 months in. Wait until you start making those parent phone calls, those emails. Wait until they've asked for the 6th time for a break on something and you've given it. And then what happens is you drop that sarcastic comment. They take offense. They blow up. Mom and dad or grandma call a parent-teacher conference. And you can't defend yourself because what you said is rude. Even though you have this huge history of giving them breaks and doing all these things, at the end of the day, you're the one that's going to look like there's pie on your face. So sarcasm always runs the risk of the bottom of the bell curve. It always runs that risk of when the teachers are worn out, the students are worn out. You know that time of the year. We all know it. So that's my biggest caution is even if you can do back and forth banter, witty all day long, there's going to come that point where somebody can take it offensively. Somebody can take it higher up. You're going to be hurt. You're the adult, but you're going to be hurt because you've built a relationship with a student. You think they love you, and they probably do, but you hit them on the wrong day, and now they're offended. And then you get very defensive. You feel attacked. You feel like, where's this coming from? You feel like giving up. I've had a whole week of school where I'm like, I can't do this anymore. And that's when my colleagues stepped in and gave me some really sweet cards and guided me along. But that's definitely something that is worth mentioning. So take a minute and I want you to start thinking about, why are you being sarcastic? So I'm just going to ask you some of these questions about sarcasm. Number one, why are you being sarcastic? No, really. Why are you being sarcastic? Do you think you're funny? Are you funny? I mean, this is like attacking language, and I'm sorry that it's coming across that way. But if you hear from other people in your life, like they're offended, or you start to notice that somebody's not really like hanging out with you anymore, or visiting you in the lunchroom, or spending time with you, it might be because your sarcasm is not landing with that person and it's becoming or feeling more offensive to them. It also could be because you're negative. I've avoided people for that reason myself. I've been that person too, but today's about sarcasm. So, do you think you're funny? And maybe you're not. Are you feeling out others while also navigating like an uncomfortable moment? You know what I mean? So like, you're not sure what to say in the situation. So you say something sarcastic to kind of like temper it or see what somebody else feels. That's sometimes why you might be sarcastic. So like you come out of a faculty meeting, they're busting you guys on recent test scores, and you're trying to kind of like feel that out with somebody. So you say something like, oh, well, I bet that was 5th grade. Ha ha ha. Or something like that. That's a situation that can be a little bit tricky. Insecurities play a huge part in how we use sarcasm in our life. Okay. So as we're going to talk later on, there's a way to use sarcasm. I'm not telling you don't use it. Actually, I specifically remember being in a meeting one time where the administration said, do not be sarcastic with your students. Stop. And I thought, well, that's how I navigate teaching. How can I stop that? It's like telling me, stop being who you are. That's a really hard thing to digest. But there is a way, and there's a method to it. A lot of this really is like a little therapy session in itself. When you take a second to think about, why am I being sarcastic with my students? Sometimes it's a way for you to kind of like push what's going on with yourself onto other people. You know, like you feel crummy today, so you make some kind of offhanded so like let me give you an example. One of the things I used to say Not really because I was feeling bad about myself, but I used to say, this is a sarcastic statement that never landed for me. I would walk up to somebody who had a really great shirt on, and I would say something like, man, that shirt looks like boop on you. You should give it to me. And I'm sorry if you're listening and I've said that to you, but the principle of that statement was, I really love that shirt and I kind of want it. So that's what I was trying to say. Why couldn't I say that? Instead, I avoided a compliment completely and went to my own kind of like my own needs there. I want that shirt. And honestly, I've gotten 2 shirts that way. And now I kind of question, I hope they didn't take that to heart. When we talk about self-policing your sarcasm later on to kind of like make progress, it's taking those statements like I just gave you and reworking them. So you have to have that stop moment where it starts to come out of your mouth, you stop, and instead I say, wow, that shirt looks awesome on you. If you ever want to get rid of it one day, I would be glad to take it off your hands. Same sarcasm, different sentiment. There's a way to be sarcastic. There's a way to lift people up and also be funny. Comedy Today is doing a great job of that. And the other part of that is, I think this is why some of those students get offended during those lulls in your group dynamics in your classroom. It's because, teens, tweens, they have enough crap going on. They have their own insecurities. They have their own inner minds kind of talking to them. And so if you say the wrong thing on the wrong day, you're already adding a brick to the weight that they're carrying. Remember what it was like to be in middle school and high school and feel every little thing going on around you. You took it to heart. And so when a teacher says something that you find a little bit offensive, that might be the day that you kind of snap. And so what that's going to lead me into here is kind of the apology side of things. Apologizing. Yeah, exactly. And it is a hard lesson to learn as a young child or as an adult, but you as the teacher are setting the example. So when we make a mistake or when we hurt someone's feelings or when your comments do not land, then it's time to simply apologize. Remember that apologizing to your students, I don't know. It's just like showing them that you're human. You're a normal person. It helps you develop respect. There's a lot of great benefits to apologizing. I hope you don't have to do it often, but that's definitely part of teaching and even part of parenting is apologizing to our children when we make mistakes. These things happen. So yes, when your sarcasm does not hit, or keep in mind, guys, there's going to be growing pains when it comes to evolving from your sarcasm. So just know that you are on the right track when you're starting to correct yourself before you say what you would normally say in a sarcastic way. There's still going to be things that don't land, and not to get discouraged because it will get easier. It will become second nature. So I want to make this very, very, very clear. You do need to apologize for misplaced sarcasm, but what you do not need to do is feel shame. This is who you are. We're not trying to change you. We're trying to grow and evolve you. So if you feel shame because of what you said, or a lot of times, I don't know about your specific situation, but you say something and then you get into your head and you're like, oh, I don't know why I would say something like that. I'm so stupid. All these things. No, you're not stupid. You're human and you're growing. And this is a growing pain. So as soon as that shame feeling or that shame emotion or that littlement comes into play, brush it off. This week in our SEL wellness unit that I teach sometimes with my classes, they were talking about an anchor. They didn't really talk about it in the way that I would have, but the point was kind of like, it was really about centering, what you're going to do to center yourself. And I shared with my students, there's 2 ways that I center myself. And by sharing this with you, my goal is when you feel that shame, You know, that like you might feel it as anxiety. You might feel it as shame. You might feel it as sweatiness. It just depends. But when you feel that, what's your coping? What's your centering? And so with my students, one thing I've been using a lot lately, I do meditate, I do journal, I do a lot of these things, but my new one that I've started doing is when my mind goes busy, it gets overwhelmed, or if I start to just like have a little bit of that shame or that anxiousness or that sweatiness, I'll take a second, close my eyes. This is like my 5-second meditation technique. And I just picture a wave. I'm kind of like sitting on my knees at the edge of the water. And it's almost like this big wave comes up and goes over top my head. It kind of slowly draws down my body. And then you know that pull you get from the wave as it carries out? I imagine that and feel that. And with that pulling of the wave, I let go. And I release it. And then I move on. It's really, really nice. It helps a lot. The other thing that I do, I have a stone that I have that's kind of like a river rock. And the other day I was feeling a lot of like chest pressure, probably anxiety. And I was just laying on the couch, taking a minute to relax. And I was just rubbing that stone across my chest, back and forth, kind of quickly. But that's what I was doing. You can hear me maybe in the audio rubbing my chest right now. And my son came in and he said, "Dad, what are you doing?" And I said, "I'm calming myself down." And once I did, I gave him the rock, and then he did the same thing to himself. So by apologizing, by kind of centering yourself, you're creating a role model. You're being a role model to your students, to your children. You're helping them create coping techniques. They're seeing that you're a deeper, more evolved person who's willing to be more human. So as you feel out your sarcasm, apologize, let that wave take you over, release it, get your head up, and keep going. But it is your job. I don't like saying but after that. Let me try again. So moving forward, it is your job to self-police your sarcasm. How are you going to keep yourself in check? Because having somebody else do it for you is rude. I don't want my spouse calling me out constantly. But for some of you, that may work. So this is coming up with that like little prompt that you're going to make for yourself, your mantra, whatever it might be. That is what you're going to say to yourself before you would normally respond with sarcasm. All right. So like, for instance, I talk a lot about my family because it's big and we have a lot of interactions back in the day. But let's say that, I don't know, a brother or whoever came up to me and was like, "You look fat." That's like their initial response. I don't know that that is sarcasm, but it could be. It's just rudeness. But anyway, instead of saying something of that nature, you might instead stop yourself, notice it in your head and in your mind, and turn to the person and say, "You look great today," or "What's changed about you," or something to that effect. Not my best example, but you get the point. So what's your mantra? Mine's more of a statement than a mantra. So it says, like in my head, this is what I would say to myself. What if I did not respond or simply responded with something kind or positive? That is basically the heart of what I want to say without the sarcasm. It can still have a smile. It can still have a nod. It can still have a cheekiness. And I gave you an example of this earlier with the shirt reference. You know, I tell people that shirt looks like boop on you. You should give it to me. And instead I would say something like, "That shirt looks phenomenal on you. I'm obsessed with it, but please do not donate it. If you ever get sick of it, call me. I want it." Okay. Which one do you think is going to sound a lot better to hear? And the reality is, by me saying "that shirt looks like boop on you, you should give it to me," you better know your audience. Because that is a rude statement. And if you get smacked across the face, you deserve it. Instead of telling my student, Jack, get it together. I'm going to throat punch you. I might say, Jack, can you look at me for a second? I really need you to focus on me. Pay attention. Just like some kind of like silly exaggeration that gets out your frustration and gets to the heart of it. It still has the humor, but it's not going to be misconstrued by a parent. It's not going to be something that's very difficult to explain to an administrator. You'll be good to go.